Hi, Ross. Thank you so much for being here and taking time today to do this interview for my YouTube channel.
Um, I am delighted. You know what? I have to be honest. I have watched a lot of videos on narcissism and codependency. And Meredith, I kind of accidentally came across yours, and it just kind of blew me away. You were like talking about the human magnet syndrome, the stuff that I write about, in a way that, like you kind of wrote it with me. And I kind of like, as soon as I like saw your video, I thought, man, I want to meet this person. She really not only knows my stuff, of course, which is every writer wants to hear that. But what I liked most about it was you put your own perspective, your own narrative, and your own opinions on it, and you expanded it. Um, and I was just delighted that we started to get to know each other and knew that we would make a great video together. So thank you. I mean, my folks are going to watch this, and your folks. Could you do me a favor? Could you tell my viewers a little bit about your background, and then I can do the same thing for your viewers?
Sure, that's awesome. So, my name is Meredith Miller, and I'm an integration coach, and my website is innerintegration.com. So, basically, I help survivors of abuse to self heal and transform their lives. And I come from a holistic background with holistic healing and also shamanism and working with non ordinary states of consciousness. And that's what I bring to the table.
Whoa, that's really deep. And she also works with codependents and people with self-love deficit disorder
Right.
who are suffering from narcissistic abuse.
Right.
Just to throw that, is that right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same metaphysical sound, but well, for your folks, I'm Ross Rosenberg. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been one for about 29 years, which scares me because I don't want to ask how old you are, but I'm getting to the point where my time in my career is as old as some of those people I'm talking to. I don't know, but I love it. But I've been a therapist for a while. I specialize in addictions, sex addiction, trauma, codependency, which I now call self-love deficit disorder. I wrote the book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, Why We Love People Who Hurt Us. And I am in the process of writing my second book, The Codependency Cure, Recovering from Self-Love Deficit Disorder.
That's awesome.
And I'm delighted to be interviewed, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, I did read your book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, which is a fantastic book. If anybody hasn't read that yet, I highly recommend getting it because, you really explain in this book just the dynamic that goes on between the emotional manipulator and the codependent. And that's so key to understand, and you line up the continuum of self. And I think it's really helpful for people to read that and see, like, where are they falling on there and where do they actually want to be? Where do they want to move toward? And it's just fantastic. And then I read the dedication of your book, which was about finding true and healthy love after codependency, with this partner of your dreams, and also the relationship that you have with your son, and the realization you had that, these dysfunctional and transgenerational patterns don't have to keep going, that you could end the legacy of abuse, you could end it for you could end it for your son, and for all future generations, coming. So I wanted to talk today about the topic of seeking true and healthy love after narcissistic abuse, because I think so many people are asking this question. I often hear people say, like, will I ever find true love? Or how will I even recognize true love if it shows up again? And, that was my own question too. And I mentioned to you earlier that, I had discovered your YouTube channel almost 2 years ago after leaving the last covert narc. And I was just distraught asking myself, like, how didn't I realize it? Like, I really felt like it felt so right. How was my intuition so wrong? And then I heard your voice say, there is no relationship that feels so right as that between a narcissist and a codependent. And it just blew my mind. And, the really empowering thing that I got out of this book that you wrote is that everything changes when the codependent gets healthy. And that was so empowering because I realized it's not just about that person. It's not like I'm a victim to these people that show up. Like, what can I do to change myself so that I don't keep attracting this in my life, so that that ends. And, that was really empowering in your book. So, I wanted to ask you, because you obviously have the wisdom of experience, like you are a success story, and also to give hope and faith to people listening to this, that it is possible to find healthy and true love, and what are some steps that they can take? What are some things they could work on? What are some ways that they can look for and recognize that when it does show up in their life? And I would love to hear what you have to say on this topic.
Well, that was a lot of questions. Let me first say I really appreciate your affirmation and validation of my work, but I want to promise you that it's ongoing and it doesn't stop because what I teach now more than ever is that codependency, which I now refer as self-love deficit disorder, is a problem of the lack of self-love. And I won't describe this because it's in my book and some of my YouTube videos, but codependency, or SLDD, can be traced back to some very painful moments in our life, our childhood, when we were raised by a harmful narcissistic parent, and that impacted us so deeply. It created this relationship template that automatically guides us to the type of person that feels familiar. And when you feel safe and familiar with someone, it exponentially increases the attraction level. And that's the chemistry. So if I came up with this idea that I call it relationship math. If you are a person who was brought up by a pathological narcissist and you learned that the only way that your mom or your dad, whoever was the narcissist, would give you the conditional love that narcissists do, is somehow to be invisible, to be the good kid, the sweet kid, the pretty one, the handsome one, the one that somehow was the trophy for the parent. You learn that your self-worth was only as good as making someone feel good about themselves. And that created the relationship template that you would carry into your adult life. And that's the human magnet syndrome. So when you were this child who was born in an environment where you never felt good enough, and you had to work really hard just to get the little bit of love that you got from your narcissist, you bring that into adulthood and you feel like you're not good just by who you are, and you project that outwards. You're not conscious of it. It's a feeling that only a narcissist will pick up on. And the narcissist will pick up on the codependent's insecurity, and the codependent will pick up on the narcissist's self-confidence, and it brings people together. And this is the human magnet syndrome. And I recommend for your viewers to read the book, because I don't really want to talk more about it because it would take much more time. But when I work with my clients to help solve this problem, it required me to figure it out in my own self. Why would a guy like myself, who was a therapist, who always tried to take care of people, who's always just trying to do the right thing, marry two women who I believe were narcissists and who were harmful to me? Why would I, after the first one, do it again the second time? Because you know what? I'm a pretty smart guy. I can read a book and then kind of repeat it back to you. If you ever do, have you written a book yet?
I did.
Okay. In fact, yes. You sent it to me.
Oh, did I?
Did you?
Oh, I sent you an excerpt from the book, I think, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
My point is, I could read something and repeat it back, and I got to read it. Shame on me. So it's not about what I knew. It's about figuring out where it came from. And I was able to figure it out that it was the trauma of what happened to me as a child. That I was carrying around those wounds of not being good enough, always feeling lost in the world of a narcissist. And once I started to isolate that my codependency or self-love deficit disorder was connected to trauma, that is when I started to dig deep in all the psychotherapy I can get. And one layer at a time, my life changed. And so the short answer to your question, and I prefer shorter questions if you don't mind.
Okay, sorry.
No, we're good. We're good. Is that I had to connect the cause of the problem to the problem. I was falling in love with harmful people, magnetically attracted to them because it somehow felt, and then this is the paradox, it felt safe and familiar.
Right.
A codependent somehow, and I can feel this and think about it, I can remember this. When you meet a narcissist for the first time, and then there's physical chemistry and attraction, there's this, like you want to help them and you want to save them. It's just like it feels so intensely familiar, and you get lost in that, and that's where it all begins. That's born out of your attachment trauma and your unresolved wounds.
Right.
So that's kind of where I started in my own journey to try to figure it out, to eventually be a partner into a healthy relationship.
How long did it take you from that point where you had the realization to when you were like truly ready to meet your ideal mate?
It's kind of funny because it's actually a very timely question. I remember after I divorced my son's mom, who I refer to as my ex-wife. X1, we got X1 and X2.
Okay.
And we're not talking superheroes. And I don't hold any malice for them anymore. But I went into therapy with a therapist named Jill Mailing, and the miracle of that therapy is she we were talking about my relationship with my parents, and I was getting really annoyed. I'm thinking, why is she so Freudian? It's like, it's not always about parents. I just want to talk about my feelings. And she kept like, and I'm like, and she goes, and then she says, have you read this book, The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller? And she goes, you should read it. And oh my God, it changed my world. It was, and I get goosebumps. It finally helped me understand why. She never mentioned codependency, but she talked about it. It explained why people like me fall in love with narcissists, because they're replicating the pattern they learned as a child in taking care of the narcissistic parent. And it was like, bam! I was like, holy shit, this explains it. And it was like some of the greatest therapy. And I thought I was done. I thought I was good. And about a year later, I met a woman, fell deeply in love. We were soulmates, and got married quickly. And almost 6 months later, she changed into a person who was, I believe, was horribly narcissistic and neglectful to the relationship. And I was in that marriage 3 years, and then we divorced, and I went back into therapy. And I was humiliated. Because I'm a therapist, for God's sake. I'm like going to therapy, proving to everyone that, I practice what I preach. But I just did the same thing. And that's when I like a supercharged battery pack on my back. That is when I said, I am not stopping until I figure this out. And that's when I went even deeper into my trauma and my wounds and the connections. And that's about the time when I started to realize that I was so lonely. I had so much loneliness inside of me my whole life. And I started to connect to the depth of despair that I had in the background always. And once I realized that I didn't feel lonely when I was with a narcissist, but it was horrible, but I felt so horribly, what I now call pathologically lonely, when I was with, by myself, I started to realize that the loneliness is the problem. I have to solve the loneliness. So we're not going to be able to hear my whole story, but if you heard my whole story, you'll see that every part of my story, I created another element that would become a part of the human magnet syndrome. Because everything that happened in my life and my family of origin, just my desire to figure it out in therapy helped me figure something out that I would eventually make it into my book. But it was the loneliness, and I just focused on the loneliness, and something shifted. Once I solved the loneliness, I noticed that I started to make better choices in relationships, and I wasn't so compelled to want to help people who didn't want to be more mutual in a relationship. So I'm going to stop there just for now, but just to see if you have any questions. But do you have any questions about what I've said so far, which started off with identifying the attachment trauma and the connection to that, and then which took about a year or two, and then figuring out the connection of loneliness and pathological loneliness.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, and I see the validity there for sure. And I think, when you talked about that inner child wound of loneliness, I realized that was my wound too. Like, I had to drink ayahuasca to figure that out, to recognize that was the wound. And I think that's the key for people to recognize, is what is that inner child wound? Like, what was that feeling that they had growing up? Because that's what creates that emptiness and that void, that like we're seeking something, someone to fill that outside of ourselves, which is why we find the narcissist and the manipulators, and instead we have to turn that inward. So people ask me a lot too, so how do you deal with that loneliness? Like, how do you fill that loneliness yourself versus looking outside of yourself?
You actually can't. You can't solve the loneliness by dealing with the loneliness as a problem itself. I have a pyramid, and I recommend, if for your viewers, is Google Ross Rosenberg self-love deficit disorder pyramids. But my pyramids, one in particular, the SLDD pyramid, demonstrates what codependency is and what it takes to treat it. So if you look at the pyramid, at the foundation is attachment trauma, which is caused from the way our narcissist parent raises us and our response to them. From there is the creation of core shame. I am just a bad person, and the only way I'm good is when I make someone else feel better about themselves. From the core shame is this pervasive feeling of loneliness, not feeling good in your own skin, and that loneliness is pervasive. It's the conscious part of our experience, because we don't connect to the attachment trauma because it's too deep and it's too painful. But the SLD, or the codependent, feels the pathological loneliness, and that pathological loneliness, which is like a withdrawal symptom. It's like an addiction. You need the pain to go away. And the way pathological loneliness goes away is by the relationship with a narcissist. And it starts off happy and fun and exciting, but all of a sudden it puts you on what I call the hamster wheel, where you keep going and going and going, trying to solve problems, trying to get someone to love you, and working at it. And this is what you learned as a child. So now you feel like you're connected in a relationship, trying to get someone to love you, who loves you intermittently if you make them feel good. And so we have the attachment trauma, the core shame, pathological loneliness, and then a way to get rid of the pathological loneliness is finding the narcissist. And there we have, in totality, is codependency, or self-love deficit disorder. So when I treat SLDD, I am not treating the symptoms. I am not treating the reason that they're always, I'm not telling them, hey, just don't fall in love with narcissists anymore. It's bad. Stay away. I'm not just treating the loneliness. I have to trace back the symptoms and the patterns to the original source. And the original source always brings me to the foundation of the trauma that they never dealt with. And that is a longer, more difficult psychotherapeutic process that solves codependency.
Hi, Ross.
My computer froze.
Oh, okay.
So, just going back to the pyramid and to your question, I don't work on the behaviors that represent codependency or self-love deficit disorder, and I don't work on the secondary conditions or sometimes even the tertiary conditions. That the solution, or as I call the codependency cure, really is being able to trace back the symptoms, which is falling in love with narcissists and losing yourself, and to the addictive compulsion to be with the narcissist, to take the loneliness away, the core shame, and the trauma. And as I go deeper and deeper and deeper in my work in this healing journey, people start to change and organically become more acceptant, more loving, more patient. And this is where I came to understand that the solution to codependency or self-love deficit disorder is the creation of self-love. And self-love can only be created if you solve the divide or the wall or the reason it is being blocked from being expressed.
Which is that trauma, right?
It is the fact that you don't love yourself because you don't feel good enough. You never feel good enough, and that core shame. I'm lonely, and no one will love me just because of the way I am. I'm bad just who I am, and I'm only good enough when I take care of someone. And the only type of person that I can take care of that loves me back are narcissists. And if you can get to that core trauma, which is a complicated process that I do in psychotherapy, that's when things start to heal. And through the healing of the wound, if you just think of a physical wound, if you have a wound that you never knew you had because it was too painful to think of, and you finally get to it, and you see it's like needed tending your whole life, you heal that wound and you become stronger and more able to love yourself and take care of yourself. And then naturally, when you love yourself more, you don't want to be hurt, pushed around, and marginalized. So a lot of therapy is superficial and symptom-based. It doesn't work. This is why I'm writing the Codependency Cure, is because I want to give people instruction on how to solve this horrible problem of self-love deficit disorder.
That's fantastic. And you're totally right, because when you love yourself, it's so obvious when someone else isn't loving you, right? When you respect yourself, it's so obvious when someone else isn't respecting you.
Absolutely. It's so simple. I couldn't believe it when I figured it out. that the antidote to codependency is self-love. Now, it's not like, okay, now I know it. I love myself.
Right.
What? Narcissists, go away. No, I wish, or please look in the mirror and say, I love myself 12 times. Not 13 or not 10, but 12. No, none of that works. Is you have to figure out what's blocking you, and that is the trauma that is hard to get to because it's so painful.
Right, and that trauma only survives in the darkness and in what's hidden. So when we bring that into the light, it already starts to change and transmute and become something else. Yes,
actually, that reminds me of a saying that I once quoted. Shame only survives in the dark. Bring it to the light, or something like that. Absolutely. What is your experience in working with trauma and its connection? Have you done that, and do you do that with some of your clients in order to release their self-perpetuating harmful relationship choices or personal
Yeah.
problems?
When I get to the opportunity to work ongoing with people, then we get to work deeper into the trauma. And so my focus is on the wholeness, on the holistic side. So creating that whole experience again, that's the trauma, is like the separation, the fragmentation of the soul. In shamanism, they would see it as a fragmentation of the soul. But it's also a disconnection. And I think like that's the source of that loneliness and all of that. And so when we can go deep into that wound, so like I know psychology goes to like the inner child wound, and then in shamanism we go a little beyond that as well, into the
Hmm.
perinatal and the prenatal and then the transpersonal realms. But when we can get that person to experience that sense of wholeness, it's like everything starts to come together, that healing starts to begin again, because the trauma starts to disappear. It just dissolves in the light of awareness and love.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So even in your own perspective, um, even though it differs from mine, but the similarity is that the codependency or the attraction to narcissist is a representation that something is not right in the way that you view the world and your connection to the world, whether it's um, an existential connection, a metaphysical connection, or a psychological connection.
Totally.
And we have to figure out a way to find out what is inhibiting that connection or causing the disconnection. And we get to trauma, and you through your methods and me through my methods, we allow people to finally get a chance to be who they were always meant to be, to experience what I believe is a God-given right to be happy
Right.
and to love yourself.
Right. That's the amazing thing about trauma, is that the very nature of trauma is transformative. And I think so much, when we're in it and we can't see out of it, all we see is the negative of that. Nothing will ever be the same, but nothing will ever be the same. So if we can
Right.
look at that in a positive way and look at that experience as some sort of blessing, to be able to extract some kind of treasure therein, and then allow that to change our lives some way, to create a new purpose, to create new passion, new meaning in life, then it's totally worth everything we went through.
You're you're absolutely right, and I imagine you do fantastic work because not a lot of people are looking for quick answers.
Right.
There's a lot of YouTube videos of angry people talking about narcissism, and there's a lot of people out there who are narcissists or covert narcissists. And I'm not gonna. Every time I say this on a video, people say, "Who are you talking about?" I'm not telling you. But they're out there, and they're on this bandstand out there, saying, stand up for yourself and attack back, and and fight back, and then there's a lot of people who are really wounded who are sharing their story, and all of these videos have value
Right.
because they're information. But what they don't do, and they never will do, is they won't solve the problem. The problem isn't the narcissist.
Right.
And that's why my book changed the discussion. The problem is we, SLDs or codependents, we are attracted to narcissists for a reason that we don't even know. And although we're never responsible for the pain and the abuse or the neglect that they cause, we are responsible for entering into that relationship and staying in it. And I teach whether it's my YouTube viewers, my seminar participants, or my clients, is that as long as you want to blame the narcissist and come up ways to fight back, you're in their net still.
Yeah.
The only solution is to find out what compels you to try to get something that you can never get from a person that will never give it to you. Why did that start? And that's the cure.
Right, because anything less is just keeping you stuck in the victimhood where there's always the blame for someone else. And yeah, the narcissist had the responsibility in that for the abuse. But what's funny is if you look at, well, where did they come from and why are they like they are? And you just keep going. It's like this endless game of dominoes, and who started it? And who started this game? We have no idea. Like, who's really to blame? It just keeps happening until someone stands up and says, it ends with me. It stops right now. I'm going to end this pattern by taking care of me. It's the only thing I have control over is me.
Absolutely. And then the taking care of me transmutes into the falling in love with self.
Right.
When you fall in love with yourself, and it sounds kind of corny, especially a guy saying it, but it is, in my book, I'm writing there's 6 stages of recovery. But one of those stages, which is stage 4, is you start to fall in love with yourself. It is the coolest experience because it follows the healing and the resolution of the trauma, and you just start to enjoy things that just for you. Well, you go to a dinner by yourself or see a movie by yourself, or you disagree with people and you think it's funny and you're not mad, and it is a wonderful experience that is self-perpetuating. It builds upon itself and you can't stop it, which is why I not only changed codependency to self-love deficit disorder, but I decided not to have the term recovering SLD, self-love deficient. I wanted to not have a negative stigma, even on my new term that has less stigma. So I created self-love abundant.
Oh, I love it.
So, and if you look at the pyramids on my website, you have the SLD, the self-love deficit disorder pyramid, and you have the self-love abundant pyramid, and they parallel with each other. So there's a point in our recovery when you overcome the trauma and you're open to loving yourself and you start building that. And that's what the codependent, the SLD never learned. And that is the beginning of the end of what we know as codependency. You can't go back because once you taste it, you don't want anyone to take it away from you again. That's why I'm calling it a cure, not a recovery.
I love that. And I love how you put it in that positive way. The word codependency, it just sounds so almost like you surrender to that destiny, and then that's always going to be defining you for as long as you live. So I love the way that you put that into a very positive spin too, with the abundance of self-love.
It's interesting because you can say that I'm taking a negative and spinning it positive, which in itself is a good thing, because people get deflated and pessimistic and too afraid when things are too negative. So yes, I'm doing that. But what I'm also saying is there is a transition somewhere along the line in my stages. There is a transition when you go from self-love deficient, and it's represented on my continuum of self that's in my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. There's a point of time where it just naturally feels right when you start to love yourself. And that moves further and further. So I am describing an internal process that actually is from negative to something more neutral to positive. And that is the evolution, the metamorphosis of our new self, our higher self, because we were inhibited and prevented to ever understand what self-love is because of our selfish narcissistic parent.
Right.
So I love this topic, and I can talk all day about it, but we should, I would love to actually invite you onto my YouTube channel and interview you and have a discussion, and maybe we can kind of continue this.
That would be awesome. Just tell us real quick, when is your next book coming out?
Oh my gosh! Everyone asks me that because I've been talking. No. When I wrote The Human Magnet Syndrome, everyone would say, "Well, this is great. This is awesome. Oh my God, this is helpful." but when are you going to tell us what to do? And I would say, well, not yet. Right now, my goal is to tell you the why, so this is my why book. Why are we always attracted to people that hurt us? And if you know the why, it'll help you get healthier. And then I would tell people, and one day I'm going to write the book, the how-to book. And then I started coming up with ideas and concepts, talking about them on YouTube, on my Facebook page, just putting them up there, and talking about my book, The Codependency Cure. So here is the official status of the Codependency Cure, Recovering from Self-Love Deficit Disorder. I have one more chapter to write for a proposal to a publisher. And I've been working on these 3 chapters for about a year. In other words, it's just taken a while for me before I wanted to write this stuff, I wanted to get the information really clear in my mind. I am looking to have the proposal submitted in a month.
Awesome.
And if I'm fortunate and the universe works with me on this process, I would love to get a book deal in 6 months, and I would love to write it 9 months after that. So according to my estimations, about a year and a half.
Awesome. Can't wait.
I have it all here, but all of this new information that I have is available on a seminar video that I created called The Codependency Cure. And if you go to my website, advancedclinicaltrainers.com, advanced clinical trainers, the way it sounds, .com, I sell my videos, my seminars, and my book, and you can order that, and then you'll get a sneak preview of what's to come.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ross, for taking the time to do this interview today and for sharing your information with everybody else. So, so grateful.
Thank you, and namaste. This was a wonderful treat for me to talk with you, a person who was just a smiling face, who on a video, who just seemed really smart, and to have a conversation. I love it. I mean, the age of technology is just making friendships and connections just so easy.
Right.
So let's do it again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ross.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.